Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Record Breakers. I'm Petey Rave, your man with no plan and two thumbs. Here with me, as always, a whole crew of people with plenty of thumbs. We've got none other than Brett.
Ahoy hoy.
We've got Patrick.
Cheers.
And we've got Drew.
Hi.
Yes. We of course gathered together, joined by a guest, which Hangouts decided to introduce ahead of me. Joined by a guest once again this week, as we are doing, we're that way in the cycle. We have none other than returning champion. We got Jaime, aka Tensorguy. How you doing, Jaime?
Hey, hello.
Yeah. We're here. Got to talk about music, of course. The provider, Jaime is here as a guest. We're doing what we did with Squiggles previously. We're bringing him on as a return guest, but giving him music to listen to. I was the one that chose it, so I guess I'm cheating, getting two turns basically. And we're kind of paying off a fun bit, but still kind of doing something really cool and interesting in my eyes. Which is, we're actually talking about Shakira and her follow-up to her major label debut, Dónde Están los Ladrones, or Where Them Dudes That Stole My Shit, or something along those lines, It's an interesting album, and Shakira's an interesting artist, to say the least, especially when we're talking about this era in her Spanish language era before, she sold out. Even though she sold out immediately when she was 13. Jaime, what context could you give about Shakira? What can you say about your experience with Shakira?
Well, Shakira is one of these artists that it didn't come from the traditional places where Latin American pop stars came. Like in when this happened, like in '98, a lot of the artists were coming either from Argentina or from Mexico, and they had a very particular type of pop, very, very highly influenced by American pop music of the late '80s and early '90s. And Shakira came from a more of edgier, a little bit harder type of pop. And I think this record, as opposed to the first one, they tried to make her more commercial, a little bit more pop.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so she had a folkier sound. She was a singer-songwriter signed to a contract at 13. Some AR guys knew what they were looking at really early. I would say with this one, the first one was very Latin pop. This one brings in, a more commercial appeal, but fleshes out more of the rock en español aspect. Mm-hmm. Definitely a little bit more. A little bit more of that in that musicality, but we'll get into the Latin elements. We'll talk about this album, but this is the follow up to her major label debut, and it's named after the fact that she's trying to say where them dudes that stole my shit because somebody stole her luggage, at an airport, yes. And she named it after this, and then. I love the story on the Wikipedia that it weaves at it. It almost said, she almost gave up on the album, but her perseverance to finish the album led her through it. Because she wasn't going to finish the album that was going to give her a lot of money and her record label a lot of money. Yeah, sure. That was going to happen. But it's a fun tale to weave. I'll ask you guys your expectation. I'll start with Patrick. Patrick, what were your expectations coming into this album?
So I've heard a little bit of Shakira's Spanish language stuff. I mostly, know the songs that were on the radio through the, mid 2000s because she became a thing.
Yeah.
And that was, honestly, I'm probably the typical American, music snob who really doesn't care about pop music, and that Shakira was just someone who sang 2 or 3 catchy songs, and then I had heard, 1 or 2 songs from her Spanish language career, but not super clear.
Mm-hmm. I'll start. Let's go, Drew. Drew, what were your expectations?
Well, I'd heard the one song where she belly danced in the video and talked about her breasts being tiny mountains.
Yeah.
I heard something about her hips maybe not being as honest as they should be.
I think the whole song was about her hips actually being honest.
Yeah, hips don't lie.
That was a joke. I wasn't really listening to the lyrics of the song.
Yes. All right. Anyways.
That I was paying more attention to the video.
Yes. All right.
That's neither here nor there.
Yes.
So I knew of Shakira, and I knew that she was a very accomplished vocalist. But I didn't really go into her stuff that much, because when she broke onto the American scene, I was too punk to care about anything. And this did not fall into my wheelhouse, really. The Shakira stuff was not really what I was going for, except, as I said, for the music videos, which were great, but neither here nor there.
Yes.
So that's about all I knew.
Yeah. Brett, I'm curious. What were your expectations coming into this album?
Well, as a man of the world and a young teenager, actually, I really don't have any sweet memories of listening to Shakira or even the music videos. I wasn't even into that. I think I was slightly more punk rock than Drew, seeing that I did not even watch the music videos. But I came into this expecting, an early version of what I've heard, somewhat through the years. Pop radio is something that no man can escape, no matter how hard he tries. I was kind of shocked to find this be less of a pop album. We'll get into that in a bit, but there's like things that I expected to find here were not found, and some things that I was not expecting to find were found. But man, if you would have told me a week ago that I was going to be listening to the kind of album I was listening to today, oh boy, I would not have believed you.
And we'll talk about the themes and elements. Musically, this, like I said, I think this flexed out and fleshed out from her debut a little bit more, and I think it's to its benefit of, because she had to follow up, she had to kind of live up to the expectations of kind of like being the musical prodigy or whatever, being like I think the thing that was thrown around, like the Hispanic Alanis Morissette or whatever like that, in some ways. And she decides this is her, like, all right, flexing her muscles, showing what she can do. It's funny. I jokingly suggested this to you, Jaime, and you said you wanted to do the original album, and then I vetoed that. And you know why? Because you're the guy that did A Kind of Magic as the Queen album for us to listen to. And I thought, you know what? It's like let's guide it back on course. Even though I love you. What would be? How would you describe this album musically?
It's very interesting. It's groundbreaking. And especially at the time, it introduced a lot of Colombian sounds, which is a very particular type of music from certain coasts. I think it's the Caribbean coast of Colombia has this interesting sound. Barranquilla. It comes from. It has a little bit of vallenato thing, flavor to it. And she incorporated this, and also a little bit of her Middle Eastern heritage, and turned it into something new. And I remember it just sounded completely different when it was played on the radio. And this particular record was huge at the time. It was, at least one or two of those songs were played at every party.
Yeah. There's a lot of like hits. There's songs that I hear multiple times at karaoke here in Miami. Some of the key tracks. But yeah, let's talk about themes and elements. Go around the horn. Patrick, what would be some of the themes and elements that caught your attention about this album?
Well, way more stylistic range than I thought I was going to get. I think Brett alluded to this. This is not a Latin pop record, although it contains a significant amount of, kind of typical Latin pop. There's a little bit of everything here. There's some like cool Middle Eastern stuff. There's the Spanish guitar that you would expect, the mariachi horns that you would expect, but then like just some kind of more straightforward pop songs. it was a lot more varied than I thought it was going to be. And then just sort of an aside, I had no idea Shakira wrote everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, coming from the American pop scene, none of them have any actual writing ability. I mean, there might be one, but I mean, we haven't had an American pop star that could write since Prince, pretty much.
And
There
I mean,
was one lady.
I will.
Gaga.
yes, and well, it's a very American thing to have pop singers that don't write their
the traditional
Elvis,
pop singer,
Frank
the
Sinatra.
the pop singer that Shakira, 3 or 4 years after this was up against, did not write their own shit.
Yeah,
Right.
They wrote nothing. They just showed up in a studio for 3 days, sang some lyrics, and left, and then went on tour. Like, she writes.
Well-
that to me, like, that is something different. And I'm assuming, and Jaime is
Yeah.
is of the appropriate age and from the appropriate part of the world. I assume, at this time there was a void in Latin music with the whole Selena murder and everything, and someone had to fill it. Someone had to be the name.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Although, it's kind of strange. Selena was a very
Ricky Martin was very
specific-
schmaltzy and
Yes.
ballady.
But I think the contemporary of Shakira is fit in that bit of and that niche was Maná, for example.
Yeah.
And people like that, and they were doing a little bit. Let me put it this way: they sounded a little bit like U2, a little bit.
Yeah.
They were doing their own thing with a lot of English language influences, but it was. I remember like living through this time and being very happy that at last Spanish language rock was not derivative as much. It was its own. It was taking the influence and then taking it their own place.
Yeah.
And so this this didn't. There was no Venn diagram between Tejano and then this. This was.
This isn't the Caribbean. That was Mexico. It was
Yes.
like,
But this
that's why actually mariachi wouldn't be something you would expect from in an album from this area.
Yeah, and this was considered rock and pop, of course, but it was and again, it took the world by storm. And I think the fact that she wrote her own stuff took her away from other groups and other
artists of
Latin
of that
America
time,
was
even like of the
basically-
area, yeah. Oh, even of the era.
They were
yeah.
basically a product.
Yeah.
They were just packaged
Yeah.
Menudo and
And things like that, yeah. Drew, what would be the themes on Elements that caught your attention?
Well, what kind of hit me was a little bit of nostalgia. Like has been said, this was a very varied sounding record. There was a lot going on here, and it was a lot deeper than I would have given it credit for. So there's that. But on the tail end of that, looking this up, it came out in, I believe it was 96, if I have my year right.
8 maybe?
98, 96, maybe 96 was the
98.
first one, and it was a 2-year.
94, 98 was the years that they both came out.
Okay, so it came out in that era, which is the same. It was what I remember. The late 90s had a rash of like female singer-songwriters that were cool within like a folk pop scene. You had your Sheryl Crows, your Jules, your Lisa Loebs, and all that. And that's sort of the feeling that hit me, was like I wanted to throw this into a mix of stuff like that and just let it go. And that was sort of cool. It's a 90s pop sound, but it has a lot more going on with it than just that. You have the mariachi, you have the sort of Middle Eastern, you have all those things, but it's all wrapped up in something that is at once more widely palatable, I guess you could say. And then there was also the fact that, like Swagger said, she's written everything, and while I can't understand a goddamn word of it, there's a quality in her voice, a strength in her voice that conveys that she cares about what she's singing about. I'm not naive. It's still a pop record that was very highly produced, so I know it was out there to make money. But there's still pop records that were made to make money that also has people behind them that care about what's going on. And then on top of that, the ebb and flow of the record was very well pieced together. It never let you stay in like the slow jam place for long, but it went there at the right points. It had a lot of really cool hooks. It had a lot of really cool danceable, like sort of dance beat sort of pop songs to it, and that to me was really cool. And I guess I just got way more out of it than I thought I was gonna get. It was a well-rounded album.
Yeah. I was, it's just kind of really interesting thing to think about. Brett, what would be some of the theme songs that caught your attention?
Well, my sails are full of wind, but I was shocked to find this was less of a pop album and more of a '90s lady rock album.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that I was expecting to get was the big voice that quivers to the point of breaking. Like there's like plenty of that. If you go in for some Shakira voice, you're gonna get some Shakira voice. But in a way that I didn't expect. Hearing, the album does open up with some dance beat. You hear dance beats underneath stuff, but then it's paired with horns. And then modulated rock and roll guitar comes in, and you're like, okay, what am I into here? You get the sound of the decade, you get the strummed acoustic slow jam songs, but there's so much of a mix of different things that you don't expect to come from this time. I mean, this is, there were a lot of risks taken with this album. It is not an easy thing to jump out of a genre if you are soon to, like, at that point, probably defining a lot of a genre, to be able to throw this much stuff in, and also there's the organ will come back, but there was an organ that was heavily used in this, and that extra kudos will be doled out here shortly.
Yes. We're talking about some interesting tracks, getting into like some of the key tracks. We'll do the record breakers thing. I'll do the record breakers thing and say, it starts off with a defined mood with Ciega Sorda Muda, blind deaf mute, or deaf, dumb, and blind if you want to be old timey. But unfortunately, I don't believe I can neither confirm nor deny Shakira's pinball skills. So
Thank you.
Her middle name is Tommy.
But some of the interesting, that sets a mood right there. It goes to other songs like Si Te Vas, which kind of it sets the rock mood as well. You have lower key songs like Moscas en la Casa, and you have talk about songs that I've heard in karaoke, things like Inevitable, or in English, Inevitable. I imagine you guys love that in the doc. Or even songs like the big hit, which transitioned over to her English language debut, Ojos Así, or Eyes Like Yours, or Eyes Like Those. Jaime, what would be some of the key tracks that you would zero in on?
Well, the ones that basically became anthems for that generation, that time, Si Te Vas. You could still hear it in the radio from time to time. Ojos Así, of course. Moscas en la Casa is a little bit of a more quiet thing, but let me put it this way: the whole record impacted, and some of these songs are still the kind of thing that if they put him at a wedding, everybody gets up and dances.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of the thing. Patrick, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I'm going to point out the bookends of this record. The opener, and pardon my Spanish, it's non-existent.
Blind deaf mute. Just go ahead and blind deaf.
Sorda Muda.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
terrible at Spanish. It's not
That
my
was perfect.
language. I'm
I,
familiar with.
I loved watching that guy wrestle at the Tokyo Dome, Ciega Sordomuda.
Knows how to put on a match.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, it's very Latin infused, but it's still got a dance beat going on. And I just pointed out because the horns were really good. It was poppy, but it was like the right kind of poppy. It was catchy and fun and enjoyable. But the one that and I think I've heard it. I've probably heard it. The last track on the album, Ojos Así,
Yeah.
or something like that.
It was on her English language debut, so you probably heard it.
I was immediately like, holy shit, Middle Eastern vibes. And at the time I was writing the note, I was reading the Wikipedia and found out, that's, part of her, descent is from that corner of the world. So it makes sense in context, but not after the whole rest of the record where you're like, what the shit is going on? And it's really awesome. And it's a super catchy song. And it's easily the best song on the record. In between, I can't say there were anything I hated. It's not really my type of music, but I was kind of impressed with the range. It was maybe a little bit scattered at times. There was definitely a Lilith Fair vibe, but in the right way, and that was not something I expected. I did not, think that was the world I was going towards, but that was in there. There was a little bit of everything, and that kind of impressed me. Just in sort of pop records tend to have 11 to 13 songs that sound more or less the same, and this had a bunch of tracks, very few of which sounded the same, and that's different, and points for that.
Drew, what would be some of the key tracks that caught your attention?
Well, Sega Sordomuda. I'm not going to apologize. I'm American. It's probably shitty. Starting off with a trumpet. Well, Drew's ears perk up. You start off with horns. Rude Boy gets very happy. And it was that mariachi trumpet. It was just awesome. And then the dance beat comes in. It sets a nice groove. And then the groove stays there. The dance happy groove stays there. But then that underpinning of that little mariachi sound, that little hints of it, really awesome. Inevitable. The slow jam that ramps up into the chorus was such a mid to late 90s thing that it made me happy. That is so 90s. It hurts sometimes, but it's still awesome, and I still love it. And it comes back from my childhood for that, because it's I get bored on slow songs sometimes, a lot of times, and especially slow pop songs. So something that doesn't stay slow the entire song and sort of goes mid-tempo for the chorus, I like a lot. And then No Creo. When I bring up the Sheryl Crow, Jewel, Lisa Loeb vibe, it came from it hit me hardest in that song. There was something about it that was it was just happy, it was upbeat, it was really well put together, and that sort of rounded it out for me, that it was those sort of songs are the songs I can just put on while I'm doing something monotonous, and even if I'm just vacuuming the house, it's I can't help but be happy and bounce around and be an excited little kid again. So.
Yeah, definitely hits those vibes all around where it was received. Brett, what will be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, I'd like to apologize to the wasp that just attacked me while I was recording this. Sorry. But yeah, okay. There were some tracks on here. Let me tell you about a few of them. The track number 2, If You Go. I'm not speaking in Spanish if somebody wants to translate for me. This is a late 90s. This is a 90s lady rock song to the core. The strummed guitars with a little organ. It's great. Track 4, I Don't Believe. From the hand percussion to the dance beat, there's a harmonica. It hits all the tropes of a 90s lady rock song. And track number 5, I believe the translation is Inevitable. In English. No, again, this is the song that has the organ solo, and it's not just an organ solo; it's a bitchin' organ solo. Anytime somebody puts an organ in something, and it's not just church singing Pentecostal music, my ears perk. And even sometimes with bitchin' Pentecostal organ music, my ears perk up. But I found it very, very agreeable. There are some songs on here that have more punch than you would think that a pop rock act would do. But geez, does it sound like the 90s. The dream of the 90s is alive in this album. But you can probably imagine that going forward, the shift, like from the Shakira that I have in my brain from my adult life, I don't. It was hard for me after hearing these 3 tracks to piece those together with the character that I had painted in my mind's eye.
But yeah, it is definitely a kind of a tonal shift when she decided to go attack America.
Oh, I want to ask a question before we get on to the next section. And that is, Brett, if sometime after this episode is recorded and done with next week, if you could email me some bitchin' Pentecostal music, I would love it.
Yeah,
You know what? The deal. I might even bring some. You just watch out. You
I'm
be careful
excited.
what you ask for, buddy.
I would love to hear some bitchin' Pentecostal music.
Yes. Yeah, some of those tracks. Now we go back around the horn. Go back around the horn to have some conclusive thoughts. Patrick, what would be your conclusive thoughts on the album overall?
It's not my thing, but I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I don't know if we talked about it. Shakira has kind of a great voice. It's not like traditionally like pretty, but she does stuff and it's her thing. Like Brett said, like the Shakira warbly thing that she does. I don't give a shit. It's awesome. Like it's her thing. She does it well. And I think, it doesn't hurt that she's insanely gorgeous, but I feel like, traditional American pop is to completely overlook everything because, said pop star is insanely gorgeous. She's kind of a good singer. She writes her own stuff. Some of the music's really good, and you get a very, very broad exposure to musical styles that are not traditionally played in America, and I think it's worth it for that alone, just for the depth and the width of the album. And it was fun. Mm-hmm. It's not bad.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what would be your conclusive thoughts about the album overall?
Well, there are a couple of reasons why I'm happy to do this show. One of them is to rediscover old stuff that I listened to that I may have not listened to as much lately as I should have. The other is to bring stuff that I think people may have forgotten about or haven't heard of that would be great for people to hear. The third being to find things that I have never even knew existed. Thanks, Petey and the Bad Rabbits. I'm always going to bring them up.
Yes.
And the fourth would be to right wrongs in my musical past and even present. Lady Gaga coming up and me having more respect for her than I ever did before is one of them. And hearing Shakira now is bringing that to the forefront. I swept her under the rug as just another pop idol, and I never, ever gave her a second thought. And I realized that was maybe wrong of me to do. And maybe I need to be more of a goddamn adult and be fair to people and not judge them by the first listen. This was really great stuff. Really, really cool. The name on the front of the record, if that is it, you're going to get a vocalist that's great. I think that goes without saying. Swagger said it. I'll say it again. The vocalist is great. The songwriting is, I don't know, because I can't speak the language.
It's clever and fun.
Is it good?
Clever.
Okay,
it's clever and
two Spanish speakers, but I can tell that with the effort that went into the record, that obviously she cared enough about what she was saying that anybody who speaks the language probably knows that the lyrics are good. And it showed musical diversity, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you can show musical diversity on a record, that means you know what you're doing in music. Whether you're a pop act, a metal act, a punk rock act, if you can show a musical through line and you can say like, yeah, no, we can play in our genre, but we can still play outside of it. We can still play with what makes our genre our genre. I think that shows a level of musical chops that someone like Shakira has, and it was unfair of me to judge.
Mm-hmm. How dare you? Brett,
Happens.
what would be your conclusive thoughts on the album overall?
Well, I mean, I can't say anything bad about this album. It hit on everything that it could and wanted to do. And, you know, even though I only know enough Spanish to get my ass kicked, I still enjoyed the vocalization of the lyrics. You know, there is something to the big voice, the warble voice, and the sort of nasally sound that comes with it. It's one of those things. It's a calling card. It's one of those things that you know what you're getting into. But it was nice to see it come from a different direction musically. You know, it's easy to find this stuff on the internet. Listen to it. Have your own opinions on this. I mean, we're not going to have the conclusive thoughts for all time. Listen to it for yourself and let us know. Email Petey. Tell him how many times I was incorrect on this album and how I'm a horrible wasp slayer.
Yes. You there, you kill bugs.
Wasp wasn't that bad of a band. You shouldn't kill them.
You leave Blackie Lawless out of this. I'm talking about the winged kind.
That being said, Jaime, what would be your conclusive thoughts on the album overall and Shakira in general?
Re-listening to it now with a little bit of a more critical eye, I find that that even though you cannot really define that star quality, you cannot say, oh, it's this. You can recognize it in this record, and you can see how, the people who were listening to her realize that this is something that could become not just Latin America's music, but it could become the world's music by bringing her to the States. I do feel that some of the some quality is lost in the translation. She has focused into a little bit of a more pop niche than this was, and I miss that. But you can still see it. You can still, in some of the stuff that she's putting out now, you can still recognize some of that brilliance from back then. And so, in that sense, I think if you want to understand Latin American rock, I think she is a stop that you have to listen to.
Yeah, I think this is really cool. Like, and I'll offer my conclusive thoughts. Is it's really cool to kind of it's on one level similar to what we had last week with Drew's pick of No Doubt's self-titled, where we had looking back fondly onto something that was the original sound and was something a group or an artist went away from that you miss, but at the same time it's also a follow-up album. You can also get that in a follow-up album to what was truly like the breakthrough, because that was the initial breakthrough was her major label debut. So it was like, this was the original sound, but you also get it in the somebody with something to prove. Like, she's got something to prove, like that, she's got a legacy to live up to already. So she's, like I said, flexing her muscles to show what she can do. And it makes for a really great album. That honestly, I wasn't even expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. Like, cause obviously this was all born from a bit that we had with Jaime, It was like, and then we'll listen to some Shakira, blah blah, but it turned into, because that little nugget in the back of my brain of wanting to let people know about this thing that only us that, in the Latin community remember. Like, Shakira is a brunette, for goodness sakes. As far as we're concerned.
With red hair on the bottom.
With red hair on the bottom sometimes, a little bit, Shakira's a brunette for as far as we're concerned. She's singing in Spanish, and she was a multi-talented artist and did more than just like these dumb pop songs that we heard on the radio in the late 90s, late 90s, early aughts. So it was cool to kind of go back to that, and I realized how much more I was right. How much more we were right than we thought we were. But that being said, that's our thoughts on the album. That's all thoughts on Shakira. We'll get to our main event of the evening with our haiku reviews. Try to wrap it up in poetic form. Let's see. Who do we start with? I'll start with Brett. Swerve you. Brett, what is your haiku?
Colombian pipes. Warbled vocals aplenty. Straight from the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, what is your haiku?
Throws many styles in a musical blender. Some good stuff pops out.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what is your haiku?
Did not expect to. Want to listen to all the women songwriters.
Mm-hmm. I'll throw in mine a second before last. From before you knew, already with lots to prove, Shakira flexes.
What do you mean by you?
I mean you.
Are you talking about who's you people? Yeah.
What do you mean, you people? Jaime, what is your haiku?
Let's see. Inevitable, ojos así. Si te vas, if you go. Moscas en la casa. Those eyes.
Nice. That works. That's gonna be fine by me. All right. So, those are our thoughts. That concludes our wrap up of Shakira's "Dónde Están los Ladrones." My Spanish is broken too. Sorry, it's just bad. Yeah. Jaime knows. Jaime's heard me speak Spanish.
It was perfect.
Yes.
It sounded like the king would speak.
Yeah.
Exactly.
El Rey.
The Spanish king
So-
that you all are under.
Or just El Rey, the
Elvis,
protagonist. By the king, do you mean El Rey, the protagonist of the song El Rey?
Yes, yeah.
As
Well,
in drunken
Elvis.
and slurred and after falling over because of a rock?
Something like that.
And that's for the Spanish speakers in the audience, because none of these dudes know what we're talking about.
We're real white, guys.
Yes. All right. That's it. Let's not lollygag. That's it for another fantastic episode of Record Breakers. You can find this album on our Record Breakers official Spotify playlist. Listen to it. You get yourself learnt something. On that Spotify playlist is another album I picked out. I know I'm getting double picks. I'm sorry. I'm double dipping the chip. It's going to be next week's album. It's going to be 90s again. It's almost accidentally 90s month. We're going to talk about Candlebox and their album Candlebox. Candlebox
Remember them, don't you? Yeah. No. Yeah.
No.
Maybe.
Maybe?
Yeah.
They were that group that did that one thing. Remember that if you were listening to
Silverchair? Wait, no,
No,
not
they were
Silverchair.
the other one.
A Candlebox. Yeah, okay.
The one that played your your bed race.
Do you remember?
Hunger Strike, right? No,
Yeah.
no, wait, no, that's Temple of the Dog.
They were the group that played your local radio station's bed race event. And that had the free concert. Yeah, they were that group. But that will be an interesting talk next week. Shout out to Paul Kessler, Wrong Brewer. But that's it for this week. You can, of course, find us all over the internet. Patrick is at Swagger. Brett is at Hibbity Bebbert, HIBBITYBIBBRD. Drew is at Extrusive for X. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers and number 4 Record Breakers. Jaime is at Tensorguy. I have to ask you, Jaime, what are you working on? Is Starship Build still maybe?
No, not. I haven't worked on it for a while, but pretty soon I'll need everybody to tweet out something. So
Okay, so it might have already happened by the time this gets posted, but if not, if anything, follow him at Tensorguy. Shows at 4 Record Breakers, recordbreakerspodcast.com, Rebellion TV on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher. We're all over the place. She'll like, subscribe. We're stealing the Geek and Sundry word. She'll like, subscribe. Until next time. Hasta los huevos.
Go Blue Jays. Toodaloo.
Annyeong.
What's toodaloo in Spanish?
Toodaloo?
Sayonara.
Konnichiwa, bitches.
I don't know, man. I don't think there is.
Konnichiwa bitches is toodaloo in Wu-Tang.
Yes.
There we go.